Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and today we are joined by Seth, a seasoned marketing and communications coach with over 2 decades of experience helping leaders and entrepreneurs master the art of authentic storytelling. Through his hands-on coaching and online courses, Seth empowers his clients to craft compelling narratives, connect deeply with their audiences, and strategically grow their brands, especially by tapping into the power of podcast guesting and speaking opportunities. Whether you're a skeptic of storytelling or someone who's never told their story on a public platform, today we are going to dive deep into tools, insights, and encourage you to find your voice and make it count. Get ready to walk away with actionable tips on how to transform your brand message into stories that stick. Well, welcome to the podcast, Seth.
Thanks, Haley. I'm excited to be here.
So, like I mentioned off screen, when I was looking at your LinkedIn, the first thing that popped up was Evil Mastermind. And obviously, we're going to link to all of your social media links in the show notes so people can go check it out. And we'll also reference them throughout the podcast, but I got to start there. Why is that the first thing that you see when you Google your name or LinkedIn search your name?
Yeah, it's probably not the first thing that you should see, right? If we had a LinkedIn success coach on here, they'd probably say, move that, if not take it off altogether, move it down somewhere to the bottom so that the very first thing talks about like exactly who you serve or exactly what you do or whatever. But I can't tell you how often somebody asks about it, like you're asking about it right now. And that's really the reason behind it. I was trying to think of a way for me to toot my own horn and say, I'm really good at what I do. And I was like playing around with mastermind behind this, that, and the other thing. But it just felt too self-aggrandizing. And who am I to call myself a mastermind? But then when I stuck evil in front of it, it became fun and silly. And then people like it, they comment on it, they laugh about it, but they get the point that I'm also saying, I know what I'm doing here and I can help you with it. The plans that I put together are going to work. They're going to work so well that people are actually going to be like, this is not fair. You must be breaking the law here or whatever. So that's the evil mastermind part. And I struggle all the time. I keep thinking I should take it out, but I have too much fun with it. So it stays.
Yeah, it kind of gives you the I'm going to do something. I'm going to change the world instead of
Right.
I'm going to change the world with your storytelling.
With sharks with freaking lasers on their heads too,
There you go. I love it. You'll have to create a image associated with the evil mastermind. Anyways, I would love to know more about your background and how you became the master of storytelling and helping leaders tell their best stories and become podcast guests.
Sure. Well, I've been telling stories. I won my first storytelling contest when I was 12. Granted, I grew up in a fairly small town, so the competition was not tremendous, but I still won. And I've been telling stories ever since. I studied creative writing in college. I went on to found a very successful weekly newspaper that became the largest weekly newspaper in Boston, and I believe still is to this day. My partner and I sold to a publishing group, and we no longer own it, but continues to this day. And I went on after that to work for a lot of politicians, for government agencies, and then eventually for national marketing and advertising group, and just constantly telling the stories of people that I was working with and working for, whether those stories be, again, a politician and the good work that he or she was doing, a company and the products that they were coming out with, and the stories behind that, the employees that were working there, the multi-generational story of the business, whatever. There's so many stories in the world, in our lives, and we often don't make proper use of them. And that's what I like doing. I love hearing stories. I love telling stories. And I really love helping people tell their stories, whether they're struggling to just plain old tell the story, or whether they are telling the story, but they know that they're just not telling it quite as well as they could be. I love doing that too, when you finally make that last little tweak and all of a sudden it becomes much more powerful. And the person whose story it is, the storyteller themselves, can really feel it and be more confident in it and see the results of the work. It's not helping children with cystic fibrosis, which is an episode of yours that I just recently listened to, but it brings me a lot of joy nonetheless.
Well, and I think I've been fascinated by human stories recently and just asking simple questions. And I have met some of the coolest people recently that are so humble, but they have wild stories that I would never imagine that, but it's just through a simple question. And people love to talk about themselves. And it's empowering for other people too, because I was talking to a friend the other day and I mentioned something about my story and she was like, oh, me too. I thought I was alone in that. And it gives that access to, oh, I am not alone, or I can relate to you, or I have someone who has gone through this. And it just unlocks the empathy and connection that we need more of in this world.
Yeah. We grew up as individuals immersed in story. I mean, what do you do with your young ones? You read them stories. People are reading and singing to their children in the womb, right? And then they're born and you're reading them you got your board books and you're reading them bedtime stories and right? And kids are always begging for another story. They're wanting to tell you their stories. They're making up their stories with their imaginary friends and telling you the stories about that, telling their imaginary friend stories. We, as a people, as a species, are obsessed with stories, and we evolved that way. It helped us to bond our villages, our tribal groups, or whatever together, because we couldn't survive as an individual or one or two people. We needed a group around us, and those stories helped to bond those groups together. So it's not surprising that we like them so much, and it's not surprising that we get such really joy out of hearing them and telling them. It's on a subconscious level, on brain chemical level. Stories fire off all kinds of neurons and cause all kinds of dopamine hits and things. And it might seem odd, but I liken it to physical contact with another human being, like a proper hug that isn't like a social air kiss hug or something. But if you genuinely hug somebody and you hold that hug for 45 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes or something, there's all kinds of chemical reactions that happen in the brain. And another seeming non sequitur, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and just the bonding that happens between the people that work together in a gym when we're rolling around with each other and wrestling. And it's competitive, but it's fun. We're all there to learn from each other and have fun. And there's a different type of bonding that happens. Scientific studies can explain it, but there's different reactions that happen when you touch people skin to skin and you interact with people on a physical level. And when you interact with people on a story level, it's a very similar thing. There is a connection that's made that is very different than other types of connections that you can, a quick hit on social media is nice, but it doesn't do the same thing as a properly told story that really activates all the right parts of the brain.
So you're telling me when my two boys fight all the time, that it's releasing oxytocin and the right chemicals that they need to bond.
It's what they need. It's not what you need, because all you're hearing is the screaming, right? And it's triggering all your anxiety mechanisms and stuff like that. But for them, it's great.
Good to know. Well, when I started out my business a few years ago, I worked with someone who's been on this podcast. Her name is Tanya, and she is all about LinkedIn and building out your thought leadership. And she's also an expert in this space. But I was really skeptical because I was like, I don't have a story. What story do I have to tell? And I feel like there are people that hesitate to tell their stories, or they're skeptical about storytelling because maybe they think they don't have a story, or it's not big enough, or it's not dramatic enough. So what would you say to them? Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more.
Well, I talk about this all the time. It's not surprising that you ask. It's one of my biggest pet peeves around what I would call business storytelling. And I'm going to wrap a nonprofit business storytelling into that. But we read all these books, whether you're shopping on Amazon or you're actually wandering into a physical bookstore, right? There's always the latest self-help or the latest business breakthrough book or something. And it's like, the lessons I learned about being an effective leader via climbing Everest and falling off of it and having to amputate my leg and crawling across the glacier and saving 7 orphans on the way. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh my God, what an amazing story. I'm so inspired. And hopefully you've learned a couple things along the way. Then you read the story by the man who led all the SEAL teams in Iraq and all the crazy things that he had to do. And wow, I could never do that. But here's some great lessons that are taken from it. The more and more we're exposed to that type of story, the more that we subconsciously start to believe that is what a story has to be. It has to be these larger than life things. If you're not like Michael Phelps and winning 9 gold medals or however many gold medals he won, then you don't have a story to tell, because who cares about me? I didn't win 9 gold medals. But I think that's absolutely quite the opposite is true. It's the smaller stories in life that are actually the most effective for business storytelling. Because the thing about those huge stories is they're very inspiring, but they're not at all relatable. I can't relate to Michael Phelps. I was a competitive swimmer for years. But I recently read some statistic where he was like, he did not miss one day of training For like 365 days a year, he was in the pool for something like 3 or 4 straight years. It's just crazy to my reality, right? I can't relate to that kind of dedication that he had. And I can't relate to being Jocko Willink and leading the SEAL teams in Iraq. It's just way outside of my life experience. I can relate to you talking about your 2 boys fighting or something, right? If you have a story about that, and I have stories about going to the grocery store. I have stories about dropping my daughter off at school. I have stories about driving. I live in Sonoma, California. During certain times of the year, there's always hot air balloons everywhere when the temperature conditions are right and foliage is right and whatnot. And I have stories about seeing balloons in the sky, and they all fit nicely into transitioning into some kind of lesson that I'm trying to teach, some tips that I'm giving for success in storytelling or podcasting or whatever the case may be. And the thing about that is that when I tell stories like that, people can really relate to that. They can see themselves in that picture, right? Like they can place themselves into dropping their kids off at school because probably they have kids that they drop off at school. Not everyone, obviously, but a huge chunk of my audience, probably a huge chunk of your audience, can relate to that story. And in relating to it, they're able to... One of the things about stories is it fires up our mirror neurons in our brain, right? So as you're telling me a story, I'm actually part of my brain is actually putting myself in your place, in your shoes, is hearing that story as if it was happening to me. But it struggles to do that if it can't. It's going to struggle to believe that I'm Jocko Willink and leading SEAL teams. It's not going to struggle to believe that I'm you dealing with my boys that are fighting. And so it makes the story stickier. And that's what we want. We want our stories to be sticky so that our audience remembers them and takes that story with them and is able to more easily recall the information that we're imparting via that story.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, I think those little things that we don't think are stories can become stories if we tell them. You said you want our stories to be sticky. What does that actually mean? And are there certain principles or rules to follow to make our story sticky?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you want to do to make a story sticky. You want to obviously you want to be telling a story that's authentic. If you're obviously a very good fiction writer, you can probably craft some story that sounds really true, but isn't true and might be able to fool people with it, right? I challenge some of my students. We play a game, the 2 truths and a lie game, but I make them it can't just be 2 true facts and 1 false fact. You have to actually tell a story around each fact. So you have to build a whole elaborate framework around it. And when people get good at it, they can build a whole elaborate framework around their lie, and it can seem very true. But most of the time, if we're not telling a story that's authentic in the sense of both true in why we're telling it, you can be telling a true story, but you're using it for some purpose that it's just you're just trying to sell me or whatever, right? If you're not genuinely trying to connect with me via your story, the story is not going to be authentic in that sense. And then the next step is what we were just talking about, is relatable. The more relatable the story is, the stickier it's going to be. The more you are able to see yourself in that other person's story, the more that story is going to affect you on a deeper level, and the more neural connections it's going to make in your brain as you're encoding the memories of the information that story's telling you. A third thing that you need to do is try to have the story try to use a lot of sensory details in story. So when I was a kid, trucks, big rig, not pickup trucks, but big rigs, 18-wheelers were all the rage. I think they always are with young kids, but I was born in 1972, so end of my grade school days are in the early 80s. And Hollywood had turned out all of these trucker movies in the late 70s, early 80s. Big name stars starring in all these trucker movies, Smokey and the Bandit and things like that. And my best friend Keith and I's favorite thing to do was to hop on our, pack some lunches, bologna and cheese, peanut butter and jelly, throw some Capri Suns or whatever in the backpack, hop on our bikes and pedal on down to the local rural route where you'd get a good amount of 18-wheeler traffic. And then we'd stand there on the side of the road. Keith would be wearing his John Deere trucker cap all the time. He never went anywhere with that hat. And I often wore my uncle's Vietnam helmet, which was way too big for me. And you could barely see my eyes peeking out from under it. We'd be in our puffer vests or whatever. And we'd be standing there by the side of the road, pumping our fists to get the truckers to blow their horns for us, right? Now, I tell the story all the time as an illustration of speaking directly to a certain audience. Because if I continued on with that story, it would all be about like, hey, there's lots of other cars and trucks and station wagons and stuff on the highway, but we didn't worry about them. We just pumped our fists, which was the message to our target audience, the truckers, and the truckers blew their horns, and we didn't worry, well, what are all these other people thinking about us, blah, blah, blah. I have this message that I'm telling the story. But the reason why I'm relating it now is probably if I were to ask people at the end of this podcast, tell me some facts. Do you remember what was Keith wearing? What was I wearing? What kind of lunches did we pack into our pack? And I even shortchanged it a little bit because I'll often talk about the crunch of the gravel on the shoulder of the road as we park our bikes or whatever. I purposely give sensory details. What did things look like? What did things sound like? If there were smells, because these also really help our brain and the mirror neurons in our brain place us into that setting. So the third thing is to if you want your story to be sticky, use sensory details. And I would say, another fun fact about me, I suffer from aphantasia, which means that I have no inner eye. I can't visualize anything in my brain. My whole intellectual world is nothing but words. Obviously, I can look at pictures and I process images, but I can't recall images. I have no visual memory. So I know that Keith always wore his trucker cap because I remember that, and that I don't need to see that to remember that I've talked about that cap. I've seen photographs from back then and he's wearing that cap. But there are plenty of times when I'm crafting a story around something and I want to add some visual details, and I don't really remember what the exact visual details. I might remember that the person was wearing a really interesting jacket, but I have no clue whether it was green or blue or anything because I can't picture it in my head. And I didn't, at the time, make note in my mind like I was reading a history book. What color was that jacket? That's the only way that I would remember it. So if in the story I need the jacket to be a color, I just make that color up, right? Because to me, there's nothing inauthentic about me saying this person was wearing this electric blue jacket versus a forest green jacket or something. The point is that I'm trying to get some visual detail in there to help put my audience in the experience. If that was a really important fact, that's a bad example, the jacket color, but if it was, for some reason, it was a really important fact, then yeah, I wouldn't obviously say it a little fast and loose with that detail. But the point is use some details. And if you're telling a story from 15 years ago or whatever, don't beat yourself up if you can't remember all of these like little details. As long as you're being honest to the intent of the story, you can fill in some details to make the story fuller and richer, as long as you're like not tricking somebody with them for some reason.
Yeah, or changing like the story on behalf of someone else, right? Making sure that it is authentic. And before we shift to like how nonprofit leaders can be podcast guests, I have one last question regarding storytelling in the world of AI. And you mentioned one of the key principles of making a story sticky is authenticity and honesty. And I've been seeing on LinkedIn and the social media platforms I'm on that people can tell if you're writing through AI or you're authentically writing your story. And obviously, you can tailor AI to sound like you, but what are your guidelines or what are your thoughts on how people can remain authentic within this AI space? Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today.
It boils down to intent. And I also think that's just it's, posts on LinkedIn or wherever about AI and, I can tell that was totally AI made up post. A lot of that is complete clickbait, rage bait. They're like, the M dash is surefire sign of AI, and then open up Catcher in the Rye. It's full of M dashes. Like we've been using M dashes for hundreds of years. AI likes M dashes because humans like M dashes. It may use it slightly more than like the average person that's not a professional writer, but that doesn't mean that it's just AI written. Now, that said, there are a lot of people that are cutting corners with AI. And I think that, again, it boils down to intent. If you think about it, there are plenty of people out there that, let's use me as an example. I worked as a press secretary. I worked as a communications director. My role as press secretary was I wrote speeches for people. I wrote op-eds for people. They didn't write them. I wrote them. But nobody would say, politician so-and-so, you didn't write that op-ed. Like, we understand that a politician has a team that writes that stuff for them. But the politician's not just going to let you write, doesn't just let me write whatever the hell I want to write, right? I have to be writing what they want. We sit down, we have a conversation. Okay, what are you looking to say? What key points do you want to make? Is there key data that you want me to include? Even if you don't know exactly what that is, I'll go look it up and we'll make sure that it works, right? They're driving what's being said. They're signing off on the overall product. Now, I think that if you are using AI to tell stories for you and you're using it you're using AI as your press secretary or your ghostwriter, the ghostwriters are going to come from you with pitchforks, but I think that's fine because you're just replicating a process that we've already been doing forever. But if you're just saying, oh, I want people to think that I'm an expert in tax law, and I just can't think of anything useful to say about tax law. ChatGPT, please write me a post about tax law. And then they write a post and you're like, oh, okay, I'm an expert. I know that you haven't it's factual. Here's my story, right? Here's my post. Here's my story. You gave no input. You just said, write me a story about a topic. To me, that's the inauthentic part. And that's where I think oftentimes, setting aside the punctuation and the emojis and other things like that, I think that's where people can oftentimes tell AI work, because it tends to be very generic. It's going to be useful information, but there's no individuality to it. There's no kind of soul to it in a sense. If you've done it the other way that I was describing, I tell Chat GPT, okay, I've got an idea. I want to write a post. I want to make these 3 points. I kind of want to lead into it with a story about a kid on a bicycle or whatever, right? I don't mean a made up story, but sketch out the broad brushstrokes of the story you want to use. If you're filling in all the pieces and then you just don't have the time to write it because you're a slow writer, or you've got to go to the hospital with your kid or whatever, I don't know. And it writes it for you and you look at it and then you tweak it and you edit it and you put a little bit more of your voice into it. I've got no problem with that. That's your story. It's still your story. It was your idea. You just had somebody else execute it the same way that an ad agency would come up with an ad for a company. It's still their ad.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because as a former current grant writer, I used to have to tailor my letters or my proposals to be in the voice and the tone of whether it's a male or a female. But I had to tailor it so that it's not signing like a letter that sounds too feminine coming from like a male, right? So yes, I think that practice has been in place for a long time, and it comes down to how you prompt and continue to put your voice into that. And we've talked a lot about storytelling, and maybe someone's come to this and they're like, okay, I feel like I have a story to tell. I feel like it's sticky, but where do I go to tell it? And you often talk about podcast guesting as a powerful brand building strategy. So why do you believe it's such an effective tool today?
We've got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try to make it brief, obviously. There are just so many positive reasons why storytelling on podcasts, getting your message out on podcasts, is an effective tool. Let's talk about one of the most obvious ones. When this episode goes live, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 minutes. So your audience is going to have listened to me for 40 minutes. Where else am I going to, keynote speaking, there's some other things, but I go on a podcast once a week, just about, certainly 2 or 3 times a month. And where else am I going to have the opportunity to speak at length with people in that way? Video posts on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever, those are great. You're speaking to people, but you're speaking to people in little sound bites. You're not getting to actually have a conversation with them. I'm not having a conversation with your audience. I'm having a conversation with you, but they're listening in on this conversation and feeling like they're involved in the conversation as well. And you're not really going to get that opportunity too many other places, if any other places, because it's a lot easier to get on a podcast than it is, in most cases, than to get on a stage. The second thing that I'd say is that you are being able to sit down in front of a new audience all the time. Now, you've done a great job by the time my audience drops, you're going to be 100-something episodes into your podcast. That's a lot of effort that you've put into building this amazing show and developing an audience that listens to you on a regular basis and trusts you, right? I just showed up today and I am getting all of the benefit of all that hard work that you put into building this audience. And I put in some work, obviously, in convincing you to bring me on the show and stuff like that. But relatively speaking, I'm making out like a bandit here, stepping onto your stage and speaking in front of your audience. And next week, I'm going to be on somebody else's stage speaking in front of their audience, and so on. And so I'm speaking in front of thousands and thousands of people every month. And that's not something that is really easy, right, for me to do. And with podcasts, it can be a very targeted, right? Like I'm not talking on a show. You think about a television show, there's people with all kinds of, how many people on a television show are nonprofit leaders? How many people watching a television show are nonprofit leaders or a radio show or whatever? But this audience is full of nothing but them, right? So you're speaking to exactly who you want to listen to. Another thing is that you are two things. One, we still have in our minds, even though intellectually we know there's lots of podcasts out there, therefore lots of podcast guests, there's lots of opportunities for people to be a guest on a podcast. When we're listening to a show that we trust and a guest comes on, we're like, wow, that person must be somewhat important, like the most important, right? I'm not a whatever world leader or something like that, or the world's premier doctor in some area or something, but there's still only one guest spot per episode, one guest spot per week. So it makes me seem like I'm special. I like to think that I am, but right? Psychologically, it makes us seem like we're special. And then you compound that by the fact that your audience really trusts you, Haley, as the host of this show, or else they would not be coming back week after week. And you introduce me as, oh, I'm really excited. We're going to be talking with Seth. He's got these great things to say. Well, your audience trusts you. So now they trust that I'm going to have great things to say and that I'm worth listening to. And now think about that. You think about you're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, and you're writing your posts. You could be saying great things, but as people are scrolling through their post, even if your post catches their eye, they're like, okay, but who's this person? They seem to be saying something interesting, but do they really know what they're talking about? Are they a leader in their field? I don't know. But that's not happening when you come on a podcast. People aren't questioning, right? Should I be trusting this person or not? Most people, most of your audience is going to be like, oh, great. Here's another great expert that Haley has brought on her show. You pile all of these things up on top of each other, and you add to it that because of the long format of a podcast, you have the time to tell some stories. You have the time to build some human connection. And I've intentionally, it's a little awkward for me because as I answer these questions, I'm also like giving away my tricks, almost like a magician explaining how his like close-up sleight of hand magic works. When I say something like, well, I practice BJJ, anybody in your audience that practices BJJ is instantly going to feel a deeper connection with me. And when I say, you say something about your boys and I'm like, yeah, I can relate as a parent, I'm dropping my daughter off school. Okay. Like all these little details that are not particularly germane to the topic that we're discussing, I have an opportunity to sprinkle it in there because it lets the audience know more about me and lets them get a fuller, rounder understanding of who I am and whether I'm their people or I'm not their people. Because ultimately, not everybody in your audience, even if every member of your audience is one of my ICP, not every one of your audience is a right fit, personality-wise, whatever, with me. And so podcasts are a great way for you to really build that know and trust and do it in a, depending on how you look at it, 45 minutes is either a long time or a short time, right? But when you're thinking about it that way, it's a relatively short amount of time rather than weeks and months of posting for people to get to know you and to understand who you are and what you're all about. We can shortcut that, not to the exclusion of other things. Then you take the content from this show and you put it on your social media channels and stuff. They all work together. But the ability to really let people into your life, explain what you do, and let them get a sense of what it would be like to work with you, whether that's working with you is working as a donor, working as a volunteer, working as, right? Like however whatever relationship you're looking to generate via your appearance, people are going to get a sense of who you are and what it would be like to have that kind of relationship with you. And that just it's going to make whatever the next step for you is that much easier, right? You're going to be halfway to having built that relationship.
That's so good. And yes, I just love all that you have said. And if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I know this is something that's on my to-do list or my dream list is to be a podcast guest. So it does take that level of vulnerability, like you said, like you are letting people into your story, right? Mm-hmm. And you are opening up to people that you don't necessarily know, which sometimes actually is easier than telling close people.
Depends on what you're talking about. Yeah.
Depends on what you're talking about. Yeah. But what would any last advice that you would give to help people build the confidence to be ready to become a podcast guest and tell their story?
Yeah. Well, I would say that you have to remember, let's jump back to my tractor trailer story. You're there to speak to a certain audience of people. It may be very narrow or it may be broader, but it's certainly not hugely broad. You're not there to talk to everybody. If you were trying to talk to everybody, you would be hugely unsuccessful because you would have to be very general, and generalities don't help us connect. Specificities help us connect. If you're like, I went to college, and you're like, yeah, I went to college too. Cool. But if I say I went to XYZ state, and you're like, oh my God, I went to XYZ state too. Well, now we're connected, right? We're going to start talking about our shared experience. And so when you're telling your stories, there's a tendency to worry about wanting to make the story approachable by everyone, when in reality, we don't want the story approachable by everyone. We want the story to be targeted towards the group that we're interested in attracting. And then we want the story to not repel in a mean way, like offend, get out of here, I don't want you. But like, you want that story to make it clear. Some people are going to be like, yeah, that's a cute story, but that's not me. That's not my life. I don't need that. That's not something that lights me up or whatever. Great, because we then can focus on the people who our story resonate with and who it was intended for. And the second thing is that I'm sure we've all had those instances in our life, particularly when we were children, when some adult came and talked to us about something. It wasn't like a Hollywood star came and talked to us. It was like our parents' friend or something came and talked to us. And they were like a doctor, and we'd never talked to a doctor before or something. And it inspired us. And then we wanted to go and become a doctor, let's say. But I bet you that doctor wasn't like, yes, I'm going to tell stories and change lives and influence people. They were just telling a story to a kid, but it had a profound impact on us. And our stories can do the same thing for other people. We think, oh, our story isn't all that interesting. That doctor was probably like, well, doctor knows a million other doctors and thinks, oh, my story as a doctor isn't all that interesting. But to that kid, it was hugely interesting. And that's true of our stories too. To some people, our stories are going to be hugely impactful, hugely interesting. And for a whole bunch of other people, it's not, and that's fine. But don't let all the other people stop you from impacting the people that would be really impacted by your story. And the third thing that I would say is you control your story. You can decide. There's a huge difference between what is personal and what is private. I think we confuse those two things. We need to give people personal details so that they can connect with us. That's how we connect with people, right? You get to know somebody and you talk to somebody while you're in an airport waiting for a trip, and you tend to talk trivialities or whatever. As you get to know somebody that you really are building a friendship with, you go deeper and you bring up more and more personal things. And you might even cross eventually over into things that are more private. But the personal things are like personal details, right? Like, I have a daughter. She's 11. She goes to a dual immersion English and Spanish school. There's all kinds of, that's those are personal details about me and her. I'm happy to tell those things to the world at large. I'm not going to tell the world at large the address of her school. That's private in the sense that I'm not going to give you that detail because I don't want to make it easy for weirdos to be stalking my daughter or something like that. And the point is you can give stories about your struggles in life, at work, at home, in your relationships and stuff like that, and be personal about it and not cross over into private. You can talk about your spouse. That doesn't mean that you talk about your intimate relations with them or something. That's private. It's a different thing. And I think when people get clarity around that, then it becomes a lot more comfortable to realize, oh, okay, I can go tell my story because I'm going to tell the personal parts. I'm not going to tell the private parts.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it also invites conversation, right? Because you talking about your daughter going to dual immersion, it's what led to that decision? How's it going? It's asking more questions that then opens the door for you to invite people in. Or if you are a nonprofit, invite people in to tell them how they can get involved, right? And ask those questions. And when people start asking questions, they start, like you said, they can put themselves, maybe they haven't had the exact same experience, but they can start envisioning how they can get involved or ways that they can support the community. And I think that is such an important part of how you tell your stories too, is to trigger that curiosity.
So much of our who we are personally informs why we're doing what we're doing. From in a nonprofit, specifically talking about nonprofit leadership and running nonprofits, working in nonprofits, clearly so much of the decision to get involved in that, whether it's a thing that you started a nonprofit because of something that was happening in your family or in your community, or whether you are a nonprofit professional that chose to apply for a job in a nonprofit and that's where your career has been. Clearly, that wasn't a decision that came from a high school standardized test. It was go work in a nonprofit or something like that. There's some personal reasons why you made those decisions. And there's probably lots of little details in your life that informed that decision. And as you're saying, in connecting with your donors, in connecting with your other community partners that may support you in your hiring decisions and whatever the case may be, your decision, your personal details and their personal details are going to talk to each other and mesh with each other and make it really obvious whether you're going to be a good fit to work together or not. And without that detail, you're just taking a shot in the dark and you're going to waste a lot of time talking to the wrong people and then finding out after the fact that the alignment is not there because the commonality isn't there.
Seth, where can people find you or follow along with you?
I would say come to my website, sethdonlin.com. And I would also like to offer your audience, and since we've been talking about storytelling, if you go to sethdonlin.com and then /lead with heart, I have a custom GPT that I use to help my clients with storytelling. It's a tool that we use. I have an exercise where I have people come up with story ideas, dropping the kids off, summer camp, whatever the story is, the little story seed. And then here's all the things that I talk about. Here's all the lessons, tips, tricks, whatever that I'm trying to communicate to people. And then randomly pick one of each and you try to fit them together. How can I explain these facts, cover these tips using this story? And it's a very helpful exercise in getting to be a better storyteller, being a better, more effective kind of business and nonprofit storyteller. And the custom GPT helps with that process. It helps prime the pump and give you some ideas and some feedback to try to figure out what stories will work together and what ones don't, and how you can make subtle changes to suddenly take a story that wasn't working well and turn it into one that does work well.
Well, thank you so much for that offer. And we'll make sure to link it in the show notes so that you can, as a listener, take advantage of that offer. Thank you so much, Seth, for being on the podcast. It has truly been a joy.
Thank you, Haley. I really appreciate being here. I had a great time.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.